Hello and welcome to the Full Hat Theory Files first feature-length interview. With all the talk at the moment in UAP and UFO disclosure being the fact that we may live in a simulation and that reality isn't actually what we think, well, myself and Matt UFOs Around the World came across a chap called Brad of Arc. He popped up onto UFOs Around the World's live on TikTok. He totally took us all by surprise and he stated that he had physical proof and evidence that we live in a simulation. Here is part one of the interview with Brad of Arc, and do pay attention, there will be part two and part three as well. I will also be uploading in the next week my investigation of the Penturk incident almost 10 years on, so please do pay attention for that as well. Without further ado, here is the interview with Brad. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and as I say, there will be a part two to come. Take care, everybody.
Okay, thank you, Brad, for coming on to UFOs Around the World. You reached out to me not long ago saying that you had stuff to share about DMT, the simulation theory. You caught me off guard in the last live that I did, and it was fascinating, and people wanted to hear more. So you stuck to your word. You have given me your time. Dan has joined us as well because he's interested in this. So introduce yourself. Let us know who you are.
Yeah, my name is Brad. Honestly, I'm just a normal guy. I've just been on this wild journey. We've had some incredible things happening to us, but prior military, former U.S. Navy, as a flight engineer on P3s. I've used that GI Bill to really milk it, and I've got a bunch of degrees from that. I've been an executive in all sorts of types of businesses over the last few years, and I started really getting into DMT because prior military, I had read an article that they was curing PTSD in veterans. And I found that fascinating. It's something I had dealt with, and I know a lot of friends of mine from the military had dealt with it. And so I started, as you start learning about DMT, like I didn't know what it was before then, but it's a fascinating thing. The experiences that people have on it were just extraordinary. And the interactions with beings and all this stuff I just found fascinating. It was really hard to find at first, and so I spent a ton of time just obsessively studying it. I've spent thousands of hours researching it. Once I was able to find it, I started using it regularly and started to understand that there were some patterns that were happening that made it predictable, and it seemed so much bigger than what you'd typically see and psychedelic experiences of what people have talked about, to where it was some mystical experience. It was so much larger than that. And over the years, really had gotten to the point to where those patterns really started to make sense, and it started to unlock some really incredible things. And this journey I've been on over the last year has been the most incredible thing I have ever heard of. And it's been something that we've been able to repeat in other people. Today during our conversation, I'm going to have extraordinary claims, and that are probably things that a lot of people are going to call bullshit on, and that's okay. Like me and anyone on my
It's
team would
okay. Don't be
submit to
scared
it.
of people calling bullshit. That's my
Oh,
favorite word.
I'm not. Yeah.
Don't be
Well,
scared. This is what we need.
we would submit to a polygraph at any point in time, in any conditions, to validate everything I'm about to say. Um, but man, I'm just a normal person. I'm not some, shamanic hippie that just happens to dabble in this stuff. This has become so much bigger than that. Like I'm a dad to 6 kids, and I'm just a normal person that has just been on a wild run. But like I said, I saw that it was curing PTSD in veterans, and so this is a fairly new molecule that we didn't. You hear a lot of people talk about thousands of years of ayahuasca trips and all of these journeys that you see in South America. It wasn't until the 1950s that they found that you could actually just vaporize it and have these 5-minute experiences. And what's incredible about it is over 90% of the people that take it just the first time, it's the most incredible experience they've ever had. And it's extremely impactful, which is just mind blowing for just 5 minutes. And so where kind of take you on a journey kind of explain how this has kind of evolved to what we're going to get into with the bigger stuff with UAPs and how all of this connects. But it started, there's a guy named Danny Goler who had started posting information about this DMT laser experiment a few years ago. And he had found that if you shine a diffracted laser beam on anything in this entire existence, you take DMT, if you adjust your eyes like you're looking at one of those 3D image posters like you'd see when we were kids, where you adjust your eyes and just the image pops out of this random noise. If you adjust your eyes like that, you start to see a matrix style code that runs through everything. And so at that point, I was still having trouble finding it, but I was really fascinated by it because he made the comment that when you look at the symbols, they're very small and they move, but they reminded him of Japanese katakana. And having been in the military and lived in Japan, I knew what that was. And it's the Japanese phonetic alphabet. So if you are not Japanese and you like on my name tag in the military, it had the katakana right under my name so that they could pronounce non-Japanese words. And so I happen to be a polymath, so I've got just a wide range of information it's deep knowledge of a lot of different topics. But I'd known about this document that they had said also looked like Japanese katakana. And we talked about it briefly the other day, but it was the carrot document. And so this was an obscure document that had been making its way around the UAP community since the mid 2000s. It's a document from the 1980s that was said to have been taken from a reverse engineering lab in Palo Alto, California, where they were reverse engineering craft. And the person that released the information was the linguist on the project. And they had all of these symbols that they had on these parts from these downed UAPs. And he made a comment in there when he explained and gave it out to everybody that it these symbols that you had on these parts had form and function, and that if you were able to put them in the right combination, he made a joke and said that you could even make a table dance. And I just thought that was absolutely fascinating. But I reached out to Danny and I said, hey, has anybody been able to draw any of these symbols? And so he responds, says they're very small. It's more complicated than you would think. And they were able to identify 7 of the symbols and draw them. So he sends those over to me. I compared those with the carrot document, and I found 4 of those symbols on that document over 100 times, which I found that good.
Sorry, Brad, do you mind me asking what sort of symbols there were?
Yeah, actually, I'll let me see if I can.
You should be able to share it on the screen, hopefully.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was thinking of a joke actually when you said about Japan. I said, imagine finding the simulation theory and then realizing it says made in Taiwan or something like that.
Absolutely. All right. Is that sharing?
It did share a second ago. Yeah, if you do it again, it might just make our screen
Sure.
smaller and whatever you. Brad, yeah, you've got it. Yeah.
Okay. So you'll see those. You can see they're very unusual. Let's zoom in on those a little bit. Obviously, there's these. A lot of people had said, "Oh, this looks like the symbols you'll see on Alienware," and it is completely accurate. You do see these symbols on Alienware products, but if you they were asked where they got the symbols from, they actually got it from this document. And so it's wild and it looks insane, but you can see that there are some glyphs in here that look fairly similar to Japanese katakana. There's obviously some others in there as well. And so it was just a wild experience. What happened though is that after I made this connection in my mind, I go into that next DMT experience and I basically present it to that space. I said, okay, I think I've connected all of these dots. It felt like I was being guided towards something and making this connection. But the moment that I laid all of this stuff out, just thinking about it in my mind, if you're familiar with chakras, with the energy centers of the soul, which before this moment I did not believe existed, I would have called absolute horse crap on it. My crown chakra, which is at the very top of my head, exploded. I got this gigantic radiating energy that had gone out the top of my head and then it spread throughout my entire body. It was a wild experience. I'd done this over 1,000 times and never had anything like that at all.
Was this while
But
you was under the influence of DMT or just totally normal?
yes, no, as while as under the influence. So, what we've learned is that DMT is in every living thing. Every living organism on this planet has a trace amount in it. We naturally make this in our bodies already. And what we've learned is that DMT is the mechanism that allows us to connect to consciousness itself. So everything that's living has that connection in a trace amount. But the more that you have in your system, the more of an antenna you are to perceive that realm. And so it presents itself very psychedelic-y. So, and there's two different experiences on it. It's eyes closed and eyes open. Eyes open, you'll be normal vision until you reach a certain point, and then your entire space that is around you shifts. It's still all of your stuff, but it completely changes how it presents itself to it. And one of my favorite experiences and examples of this is there was a time I'm living in my living room, I tap in, and then my entire house of everything that is mine turns into like a Simpsons style cartoon. It's fascinating. There's really no boundaries to what it can show you, especially with your eyes closed, because with your eyes are closed, there's no limits, and it can take you to other realms. There's beings that show up. There's all sorts of ancient Hindu and Egyptian visuals that come in. And everybody for the longest time thought that it was just a construct of the mind. But what we found is that there's an external influence, and it is not under your control. As we've come to find out, that moment where my crown chakra exploded and I got that radiating feeling is a significant moment, and we're dubbed it the point of gnosis. It's the moment that you understand that what you're experiencing is the DMT space is real. It completely shifts how it interacts with you. It stops being a psychedelic and it becomes something more of a tool to a gateway to be able to connect to this realm. And what happens after that is beings that you would typically occasionally come in contact with start showing up every single time. And so those experiences and those beings, we can also come to find out, is once you make that shift is when your spirit guides, I completely would have told you all of this was bullshit prior to this happening. But they start showing up.
Did it feel more like reality than reality itself?
Absolutely. And so I'll be able to explain that a little bit more as we get into more of the story. There is a massive reason for that. So but yes, it consistently across experiences, anybody who's tried it, when you go into these spaces, it doesn't feel like it's anything new. It actually feels more real than this reality that we're in. And you feel like you've been there thousands of times, and the beings that you interact with, they know everything about you, and it's not unusual for you. You almost feel like you've known them for lifetimes, and you have.
Would you say that the beings that you've came into contact with, maybe a form of your higher consciousness, perhaps, or?
So you have the ability to connect to your higher self. So let me break that down a little bit. So what we have learned is that reincarnation is real, and that's the reason that you deal with these beings and why they feel so familiar. So there's a lot of overlap with near-death experiences as well, but you're tapping into that divine realm, if you will, and that if you were to die, a lot of people equate these experiences to what happens when you die, and they're not technically wrong. The moment you die, there's there's the thought that you release a large amount of endogenous DMT as a part of those and the near-death experiences. That's why those are so strong. Um, so the more that you're tapping into that, the more you're starting to get familiar with it. So from that moment, when that moment is it's inducible, uh, it completely shifts and it starts to really escalate your interactions with DMT. It really shifts how from a psychedelic to something completely different. I knew that something big was going to happen after that because they were really ramping up. We started to get the biggest one was the consistency of the beings. Like I have one that shows up every time. And what we found out now, I can tell where she's at. She is with me all of the time. And she's always been with me. I just wasn't able to perceive it. I now have learned to be able to feel and tell where she's at.
Is this an
Without
alien?
DMT.
Is this sort of an alien being, or can you describe this person?
This will be more of it there. So each person's spirit guides are a different mix of beings, and we're not quite sure what causes the mix. Sometimes it's legitimate Book of Enoch angels. It is like Altera, she's above me right now. I can tell I can tell where she's at. Whatever she's in will glitch when I blink. It's just a slight little glitch. But as she's revealed more of herself over time, I'm pretty sure that she is a seraphim. She is always watching. And it doesn't matter if I'm in a hotel room or wherever I'm at. She's always around. And so that was really the only being that I had a consistent interaction with. As I've taught other people how to do this, they've had other major interactions, which we'll get into in a little bit. So July 28th of last year, I'd known something important was about to happen. And so just kind of a random night, my wife had been dealing with a shoulder injury. And so I helped her, like trying to rub out her back a little bit, and she had fell asleep, and I wasn't able to sleep in my bed, and I didn't want to bother her because I know she'd been going through a lot of pain. Just wanted to let her rest. So I go into my living room. I'm laying on the couch and I'm trying to sleep, and I've got aphantasia. So when I close my eyes, I just see the back of my eyelids. That's been that way my whole life. But that night, unusually, I started getting these like Looney Tunes style cartoons that were running in my mind's eye. And I've watched them for like 10 minutes. It was just fascinating because it's the first time that had ever happened. But the DMT has this thing, when you get familiar with it, it feels like it starts to call to you. You'll get these nudges or these signals that's got some information for you. And I took that as a sign. And so I tapped in that night, and then the most intense experience of my entire life happened. I started having this energy, overwhelming, coming from the bottom of my feet up through the top of my head. And it was just rushing and running through me. And it was coming with a message that said, I am coming through you. I started breathing very heavily, and my heart was pounding, but it was the equivalent of running a sprint, but I was not in any distress. It was just naturally happening. And so I had my hand on my chest and I'm trying to figure out what's going on, but I'm realizing I'm fine. Like, okay, I'm cool. I'm good. And so I just made the comment, like, if whatever this is, I'm ready. The moment that happened, this giant ball of white lightning energy collects above me and then slams into my chest, and it starts pounding. And I'm laying down, looking down at my chest, and it looks like lightning bolts that are spreading out and coming into my chest, and it is burrowing its way inside of me. And so it takes like 2 to 3 minutes, and then it's inside of me. And I started getting this radiating energy flows that were running through my entire nervous system as I'm laying there. Is massively overwhelming. And so the moment was coherent enough to be able to function, I ran from my living room into my bedroom, waking my wife up and freaking out. Like I couldn't get the words out. I'm hysterically crying, not out of fear, just out of just this overwhelming just emotions were coming out. And I can't imagine being in her shoes and waking up to that. She was very patient with me and gave me some time to kind of explain it. It was wildly overwhelming. Um, and so remarkably, she's able to go to sleep right after that, but I couldn't sleep at all. But that timing was really significant. I'd had a colleague that I'd worked with for almost 2 years that we'd never met in person. Everything we do is remote. And so he was coming in town with his girlfriend, and I'd sent him, he dealt with some issues. I'll explain kind of his story here in a little bit. He's been dealing with some health issues, autonomic issues from an injury that he sustained while in the Air Force. And I had sent him some thinking, hey, this helped me a ton. Maybe this will help you. He'd never done it before, still had never done it. But he comes into town, and that was the very next day after that had happened. And I'm still kind of freaking out. And so he comes in, and they had known that this DMT stuff was a significant part of my life, but I just data dumped everything that had happened, and I pretty much overwhelmed them with information. I'd shown them the stuff in the DMT laser experiment. I showed them the carrot document and all of this research that I had done. And so it really kind of a unique experience after that, because after that moment, my DMT experiences completely changed. Instead of being able to tap in and having all those psychedelic experiences in the space around me, it wasn't that way at all. I had 20/20 vision, and which was very unusual. It did not matter how much I took, it did not shift my perspective and perception of the reality around me, except when we went outside. So I had felt the need we go outside, and so I tapped in again. And what happened after there is it's a beautiful night, sitting around a fire, looking up at the sky. I tap in, I started seeing these lights that were flashing around certain stars. And then there was these black lines that were running through the sky. And like,
Brad, do you want
it
to just
almost,
do you want to stop your screen sharing so we can actually see you properly on the so I can
oh, yeah, absolutely.
just put it on when you're sharing stuff, that's all.
Yep. Sorry about
Thank
that.
you.
Sorry about that. So we started looking at the sky. So I started those lights around the stars and those black lines. It looked like if you were looking at like a stained glass window, and there's really they're geometric, those black lines that are running in between. It's kind of what it looked like. We've come to find out that that being that had entered my chest it had kind of integrated with me, and those black lines that you see in the sky, the messaging that we're getting from those beings, those are these tunnels and systems that these extraterrestrials will use for interstellar travel. And there's lights that show up around stars, not the stars themselves. They start flashing around the stars, and it is just a beacon so that these beings know that there's civilizations that live there. Which was wild. My dad had grown up around ancient aliens and all of that stuff. My dad had had a UFO encounter in his early 20s, and so he was always really fascinated with this stuff. And I, by proxy, had just been exposed to a lot of it. So, what as I introduced them to this, he was able to get to that same point of gnosis within a week. And so what had taken me thousands of hours and thousands of times to trying this and understanding how DMT works, we were able to induce that moment from somebody who had never had it to being able to get to that same point within a week. And so he lives out of state. He calls me, and he said that he started having his interactions when these beings were showing up. And one of them, he woke up, and then he started having these equations burned in his brain. And so didn't really know much about it. I'm not a mathematician. I'm above average intelligence. I've got a master's. I have an MBA. I did postgraduate studies at Stanford in engineering management, which a lot of quantitative analysis, but when it gets into math, it was not really ever my bag. And so it wasn't his either. And so he said he Googled, couldn't find anything like it. But then we put it right at that point is when ChatGPT released their that physics version, the 3.5. It had a PhD in physics. And so we put that information in there, and what it spit out just really blew our minds. It said that that equation bridged the gap between classical and quantum physics. And so we didn't really know what to do with it. At that point in time, they hadn't given us any guidance on what it meant, or it was just some weird interaction that we're just kind of sitting on some information. But what we had come to find out as I got to know each other more, his story is incredible. So in 2012, he was subject to a chemical attack in Eastern Europe. He is one of 9 airmen that were exposed to this, and he's the only one that survived. They brought him back to Walter Reed Hospital, and it was such a massive trauma to his system. He died 7 times over those next 4 years. He had to relearn how to walk and how to talk. And so he would cross over and come back. But some interesting things were happening to him when that happened. He was waking up speaking fluent Hebrew. Doesn't know Hebrew, but he's at Bethesda at the Walter Reed Hospital. It's the main military hospital outside of Washington, D.C. As that started happening, they started bringing in these 3-letter agencies that were they started filming what he was saying and translating it. There was a congressional investigation that happened over it. They started taking as he's starting to recover. And they started recruiting him for some of these 3-letter agency programs like Stargate. And so what has happened over that time and since then is we now have over 50 of these. And we've also understood that there is a extreme connection between this realm that you would talk about with the DMT space and after you die and all of that. So every time you have an NDE, that veil between this reality and that one thins. And he's had so many of them that his is very thin. Since this has happened, it's something he continues to have issues with. It will manifest in seizures and autonomic issues. And so since then, he's died again twice. So he's now at a total of 9. But because of that, the information that comes through.
Can you say, sorry, I might have just missed that. I might have just I've been like just daydreaming while you're talking, like fascinated. You said he's died again twice. Like, just explain
Yes.
how he's died. What's happened?
So what will happen is he'll start having major seizures. And so his girlfriend, fiance, life partner, she really takes care of him. And so when he extends himself too far, puts too much on his plate or is too active, it causes those to really ramp up. And so we were doing some travel as a result of some of this stuff, and that put a lot of strain on him. And on the way back, he started to crash, and so he would go into the hospital, and his heartbeat would get down to 12, and so he was crossing over. His story, they've wanted to make documentaries just about just that portion of his life. But what has happened is that if you were to combine somebody with an NDE with this point of gnosis that we can get with DMT, it is supercharged. And so now that we have all of these equations, if every one of them could be a Nobel Prize. There's some of the most significant information about how our universe works and how these technologies that be used to benefit us as a civilization has been, for whatever reason, has been given through him. And so at that point in time, I was getting visions that I needed to get my information to Terrence Howard, which was really interesting. Around that time, he had just been on Joe Rogan. There were some things that were happening to him on that podcast that we recognized. If you're not familiar, if you watch it, in the beginning, they have a lot of electrical issues. The microphones or computers are not working properly. And they were saying like, oh, maybe the government's watching us. But we saw that as a trigger because we've realized that once you hit that point of gnosis, a lot of electrical interference starts to follow you. We've been able to replicate and induce this in many of my friends, and I'll get calls from them very frustrated, or they can't turn their electrical equipment on.
Since you've just mentioned that, yours has just started to freeze a little bit on and off.
Yeah,
It has,
yeah,
yeah.
and that happens. So what happens when you do this? You start emitting an electromagnetic frequency that really disrupts technology. And so, like, I've made a bunch of videos about this stuff on TikTok, and it's to the point to where it even can control. Like, if I start to say things that I'm not supposed to say yet, it will completely cut my audio off. If I'm playing my PlayStation and I'm realizing that I'm spending too much time doing that and I needed to go focus back on this journey that I'm on, it will, no joke, turn my PlayStation off, completely shut it off. And so we were trying to navigate, like, my life completely shifted after that moment, and it shifts everybody's after that moment happens. And so my wife had a couple of years before that, I got through yoga teacher training. And I wasn't spiritual at all. Before that moment, I was completely agnostic. I had grown up in a strong Christian family, and I just kind of studied my way away from it. But with all of this stuff that happening, it felt very spiritual. And I subscribed to that Gaia channel years ago and trying to understand some of the concepts that my wife was learning, but it was too much woo for me. Like, it was just too far out there. There's some of that stuff on that channel is just really bizarre. And so I didn't really mess with it, but I was like, all of this is happening. Let's give this a shot. Let's kind of resubscribe. And so ever since that crown chakra and that being entered my body, I can feel all of my chakras all the time. And on this journey, if I have a direction or a choice to make, I can think about one or the other, and I'll start getting this surge of energy in one of my chakras, and it's usually the solar plexus. And so I was just messing around on that channel. I started going through the list of shows, and I hit one called Divine Science, and I got an energy surge. I was like, okay, well, let's explore this. So I go episode to episode, and I get to episode 5, and I get another surge, and it just happens to be on DMT. And okay, so let's watch it. And so it starts out with Paul Hynek, who is the son of Jayon Hynek with Project Blue Book. He's also the head of Mensa. He's a professor at Pepperdine, and he's also the CFO of the Monroe Institute. But every single, they're making the connection between the DMT space and the UAP connection. And so I have having all of this happen to us. I reached out to him. I sent Paul an email. I said, hey, wild things are happening. I think I can help you make this connection. And even in that episode, there's a gentleman in there, Daniel McQueen, who runs a DMT and psychedelic treatment center in Boulder, Colorado, made the comment that for this to be able to prove that this is real, we're going to need something like math that doesn't exist to come through, something along those lines. I was like, we have that. We absolutely have that. And so after talking with Paul, he invites us out to LA where he lives. And so while we're out there, we get to spend a few days with him. He is a DMT expert as well. He speaks about those connections, and obviously the UAP connection is huge in his family. And so we're out there. We also had some time to film. They're filming the DMT laser experiment documentary. So we got to film for that. And it's kind of funny. We're filming for that. And my colleague and I, kind of going back to the electrical interference, I'd been talking in this chair for like an hour and a half. And then all of a sudden a hardwired mic just shuts off. And I just kind of look at my friend, and I just kind of smiled, and he smiled at me, and I was like, I think it's your turn. And as soon as he sits down, the mic comes back on. It's really weird how this.
Do you know this laser experiment? You need to be on DMT. Is there a way that you can get this across as evidence without people that are on DMT? Is there a way to document?
Yeah, I will get there. We're working on that right now.
Sorry, Brad, just jump in. You're saying that the amount of DMT experiences that you had is now starting to sort of mess with electronics. Is that right? Is that what you're trying to say? Or, it sort of cuts power out?
So the DMT does not allow that. What is the shift in how we connect with consciousness in that moment has allowed us for whatever reason, causes electrical interference. It's electromagnetism.
Yeah, so is it a case of sort of, so for instance, you could be doing something and then they want you to maybe see something or pass a message on, and then you have that electrical interference.
No, it seems there could be a correlation there, but for most part, it just seems to be a distortion that is being emitted from us as a result of this ability. Um, and so Paul has a lot of connections in the UAP community and the DMT community, and so he got us connected with Dr. Andrew McGallimore, who's probably the leading science. He's a computational neuroscientist out of Japan. He's the one who helped worked with Rick Strassman to create the DMT-X studies with Imperial College in London. They did the extended state DMT studies where they intravenously and gave it to patients, and to completely extend, instead of 5 minutes, they could stay 30 minutes or an hour. And they started doing MRI scans and all sorts of studies with it as a part of that. And so he's right now the biggest name in DMT, but he has also been talking about this connection. He feels that it really explains the simulation theory that a lot of people have. And so he was able to get us connected with Dr. Bernard Carr, who's an astrophysicist that trained with Stephen Hawking, one of the leading astrophysicists in the world. And so they had some time to review our math, and it was dimensionally consistent, but he felt like that there was an issue with some of their current understandings of physics. And at that time, it felt like a little bit of a rug pull. But what we've come to understand, there's a reason why it doesn't make sense to traditional physics, and I'll explain that here in a little bit. But since then, we reached out to other physicists because we started realizing that the connection was really about consciousness itself. So, like Dr. Federico Fagin, and others. But what we run into is that when we start explaining where this information comes from, it really throws traditional scientists through a loop, and it's almost like it doesn't compute. And so around February, I started getting guidance that I was supposed to go on a 40-day water only fast. The moment it started giving me a hard time about the things that I was eating and putting in my body. I would get visions of giant coolers full of food just being dumped over. And then so I'm starting to clean up my health. And so I'd been vaping at the time. I'd stopped doing that. And when I stopped, which I didn't like, and so I started taking those semaglutides, I started taking Wegovy, and so I took a shot of it. And the moment I did that next time I went in on a DMT experience, I could feel the being inside of me move to where that injection point was, and it was then giving me a hard time about taking it. And so I stopped doing that. I dealt with some injuries in the military as well. I had a traumatic arm injury. I'd lost a lot of the function in two of my fingers. I'd severed a nerve. I'd had 4 surgeries. I mean, I've got a significant scar. I had a significant range of motion issues. It's a large part of my disability rating from the military. But that being grabbed a nerve in my shoulder blade, and I was in extreme pain for 4 weeks. But the moment that it released, since 2008, I had not been able to feel my ring finger or my pinky finger. I could feel those completely, and all of my range of motion completely was restored.
Wow.
I had X-rays done recently. I have a lot of medical history because of this, and being in the military, I've got documentation about all of the issues that I had. But what was interesting is there's this little piece of metal now that's just in my forearm, which there's no evidence of it ever being there. We haven't quite messed with it yet, just because everything that we're dealing with is really significant. So I started going this 40-day water only fast, and I started posting a little bit of my story every day on TikTok. And so as I'm going through that, it was hard, but my body started really, once your body goes into that phase it starts to cannibalize itself, but it cannibalizes the damaged parts of you first. And so it's a lot about cell renewal and getting all of this junk out of your system. It's like legitimately a complete reset. But as I'm going through this, we had been taught these equations, kind of how the universe works. And there's also my colleague had channeled all of this information. And in one sitting, it ended up being 138 pages, and it's completely he's sitting there typing for 8 hours, and his partner says she's never seen him ever type that fast. He's even as he's typing, he's telling the guides, please slow down, please slow down. And so he's just typing all of this information out. It is how our universe works. It is the universal laws of how to navigate life through balance, and the laws of light energy, the laws of dark wisdom, which I've been teaching lately on my TikTok. But it's basically a guidebook of how to navigate this experience, which was fascinating. And so, but one of the things that they had asked me to do during this was to has anyone been able to figure out everything that you know about the universe? Has anyone been able to figure out that before? And so I started doing a bunch of research, trying to figure out, okay, these are the things that we know of how this works.
Can I just jump in with one quick question? It might tie in with what you're going to say. Could DMT be used by maybe the gatekeepers, the CIA and stuff? Can you train yourself to have a certain experience in DMT, or is it just totally random? You get told that when you go into the DMT world, you can't control it. Is there a way potentially someone's been able to control this?
Yes, some people are gifted and can control it. There are other gifts that are inherent with people, especially like with the Stargate program. The people that can remote view and do all of that are naturally gifted. What we have found is that if you combine those gifts with DMT, it extremely enhances it. Now, whether they use that or not, I don't know. They may not. I know that other people may have been able to hit that point of gnosis unknowingly. For like Danny, when he explains his story, if you were to see the DMT laser experiment, it is not something anybody would happenstance be able to figure out on their own. And so through a series of synchronicities and guidance, he was able to realize that he needed to do that. But he also, one of the beings showed him how to play a song on the guitar. And so, but that moment for him was the moment that he realized, like, wait, no, they're giving me actionable information that is functional in this reality. And this is completely outside of him. And so that was his point of gnosis. He didn't quite understand it. Other people had been able to hit this. I think we were maybe the first ones to understand what the cause is and what induces it. And so we've been getting some information like, okay, the Emerald Tablets of Thoth. Are you familiar with those at all?
Yes.
Okay. We got information that those were going to be important. I'd never even heard of them. None of us had ever heard of them. So we start looking into that story and learning all about all of that. And so as I'm learning and trying to figure all this out, I could find tenets of what we knew in certain religions or physicists and theories, but only one group had all of the right answers that we had, and it was the Rosicrucians. And so it was a mystery school. Like a lot of people don't know much about them. And so, but the question then started being, why do they know the answers hundreds of years ago? And so I ended up joining the Rosicrucians, but I'll tell you some of the information that's publicly available that just people really have just kind of glossed over and have not paid attention to. But they're the keepers. Like they've started in the 1600s, but that's just the Rosicrucian portion. It had evolved into that. Before that, they have all the records of the Essenes, which is a mystical group around the times of Jesus. And then also, they also have all the records, and they're exhaustive, of the Great White Brotherhood, which is a mystical group, which have been the parent group from Giza for the Essenes. And so they no joke have been holding on to the missing lives of Jesus, like all of the portions that are not in the Bible. And what is in there is this really mystical life, and it explains so much more of how all of that connects to these bigger pictures. But like everything is guided by synchronicities on a lot of this stuff. So as I'm even looking into the Rosicrucians, they started the very first video, they talk about a bunch of Egyptian stuff, and then there's Thoth, and they start talking about the emerald tablets, and it's almost like a signal, like, okay, I'm on the right path. And so if you're familiar with his Thoth story, it's that he was a part of Atlantis as a record keeper of Atlantis. At the fall of Atlantis, he goes to the land of Kem, which is modern day Egypt, and he says that he builds the pyramids, and there's this underground chamber called the Halls of Amenti. We they like there's also in the early 1920s there was a guy man
Which
named
maybe they've
Maurice.
just found. We don't know yet. Maybe they've found it.
Yeah, I'll get there. Yeah, so Maurice Doreal in the 1920s was living in America. He was a Rosicrucian. He started having these visions in his dreams that he needed to go to Mexico and that he would find the actual emerald tablets that had been missing. And so he, on a whim, goes down there and legitimately finds them exactly where in his visions that they said that he would find them. He collects them and takes them back to Egypt. But it's interesting. They said that it's an underground chamber at the Temple of Quetzalcoatl, which is real interesting because currently they don't know that exists. And so I start talking about this stuff on my TikTok and the things that I'm learning. The Rosicrucians have been also protecting the information of the real story of Mary Magdalene, which is going to end up being a big deal. And so the story, he takes them back to Egypt. I made this TikTok post, and then 2 weeks later is when the scans of the underground chambers get released. That information was not available when I made that post. But what was interesting is this.
So you were speaking about the underground chamber 2 weeks before anybody released the information.
Correct. Yeah.
That was all through DMT experiences and messages that you received.
Yes. Yeah. And so if you start looking through what their records say of the story of Jesus, it explains that Mary and Joseph were also members. Joseph was a member of the Essenes. Mary's parents were members of the Essenes. They offered her to the high priest there. They knew that all of this was going to happen, and it was all very ritualistic. But the reason that he schooled everybody at the temple at 12 or 13 is because he had grown up in it. But then there's a big gap in between that story. And so, but if the Rosicrucians records say that he went to India and Tibet and then these mystery schools and learned about Buddhism, learned about Hindu. And then that group that he's with then returns back to Egypt. And it says that there is a door between the paws of the Sphinx that goes down to a secret tunnel. And that tunnel comes up into a hidden chamber within the pyramids of Giza. And that is John the Baptist is in this story, but that is the moment that they do a ritual. And a lot of Christians don't understand that Christ is an anointing. It's a separate thing than the Jesus, the person. And so it is something that there's an event that happened there where that he became a Christ, and attained Christ consciousness, if you will. But that fifth chamber, the hidden chamber, was also a part of those scans that they found that fifth chamber that they did not know existed. And there's not a way to get into it through the way you can get into the other chambers. And so, which is just mind blowing that everything since then, even including that, is a good example of it. Life for us has really started to unfold like a movie. Like we start getting this information that things like the emerald tablets that will get put on our radar. We don't quite understand why, and it'll make sense later. So like they started explaining the Voynich manuscript, which is a book, like a highly encoded book from the 1400s. They've been, for the hundreds of years, been trying to decipher it. It's held at Yale. There's people all over the world trying to decipher this thing. And also at that point, we started a Discord And so I started just making this Discord, and I was thinking it was going to be about DMT, but as it has evolved, it has gotten into things that are way more than that, because it's now all based around consciousness. Consciousness is fundamental to our entire existence. And so we start talking about manifestation, telepathy, lucid dreaming, the gateway tapes, all of these different ways to interact and have these advanced relationships with consciousness. And some people have more gifts than others. And the community that we've built there is mind-blowing. It also, we've got a whole section on there about the GATE program, which is the Gifted and Talented program in the United States. And the more that we have dug into it, and the more people that are in there, there's a lot of traumas and stories of people with these gifts that were identified as children
Do you
through
not
that
think
program.
this is what Stranger Things is based on?
Stranger Things is based on Montauk, but yes,
Yeah,
it
the
is.
Montauk, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and so very similar, and so it's all connected. And so like, these kids are talking about going to these camps, and they're also, there's been a lot of talk about the gateway tapes. This basically, it's a hemisync. You put.
I've tried it. I've actually tried to do it. I've gotten to like tape 10, and
Yeah,
I got tingling all over my body, and I panicked
yeah,
because
it's
and it was right at the end. It was when you're doing
yeah.
the countdown, and I got all tingly, and I could feel myself coming out, or I could feel myself going higher with my eyes closed, and I panicked and just opened my eyes and like, no, I'm not doing this. I'm not doing this.
You know those
So
weird sounds that they make at the very beginning of those tapes,
yeah,
the little beeping sounds. Those were also a part of the GATE program, as they're evaluating kids for gifted and talented. Gifted and talented, that GATE program was to identify children that have those gifts. And so the more that you advance, like some of these were going to major GATE camps, and they're deciphering Russian messages, and like it's a bunch of, it's this not stuff like doing advanced math. Like I've got intelligent kids that are in gifted and talented, and it's just more honors level things at this point. But at that point in time, they were actually seeking out children that had those gifts and then monitoring them throughout their life, which is mind blowing. And more information is coming about that all the time. But so like everything started really unfolding like a movie. But I mentioned earlier that I had gotten a vision that I needed to get my information to Terrence Howard. And so I reached out, which, like I said, my story is wild, and the information that we're getting is not from us. And so when we explain all that, it takes a minute for that to register and be able to validate it enough to give me enough time to explain it. But Terrence has been getting math and all of this stuff that his advancements are, that's coming to him in his dreams. And so another, like, all of this consciousness connected, but one of his major concepts is he's getting a lot of pushback because his concepts are not traditionally supported in our understanding of how physics works. And so he says that the square root logic breaks down at the square root of 2. And that he's also searching, he felt like that there was this missing constant in physics that was really a key to unlocking everything. And so as I'm trying to get past this gatekeeper, and all of these equations are evolving, we're starting to understand them more. I started realizing through all this evaluation that our information that we had explained exactly why the square root of logic, or square root of 2 logic, breaks down, and this missing harmonic constant that he was talking about, we had what it was. And so I'd reached out to his gatekeeper. His name's Chris, and he's a brilliant human. Another near-death experiencer. And so it's a very specific number that they were searching for, and I just, is the value you're looking for this really specific ratio? And they said yes. They just found it the week prior and they found it through advanced geometry, and we had it through our quantum physics equations. And so that it exists is going to be enormous, because what it does is it explains the shape of our universe. And the reason that physics breaks down is because our modern physics thinks that our universe is an open and expanding environment. But what we are going to explain and be able to prove is that it is not. We are in a closed environment. and because of the shape of the boundary of that is got a curve in it, that is why the square root of 2 breaks down. But once we combined what they were getting from their dreams and what we were getting from the DMT space, they locked into each other and it really started to unfold. They were getting parts of the puzzle, a significant portion of it, but it would not have worked on its own. There was entropy that would have happened, and there were corrections that needed to be made on both sides. And the moment that happened, we are literally sitting on some of the biggest information that will ever be made in physics history. We're currently working through the DMT laser experiment because what we've realized is the moment that your room shifts on DMT, you're tuning your brain and you're tuning it to that harmonic constant. And the moment that your brain locks into that is when everything shifts. And so the DMT laser experiment, there is a veil that exists, and it's a boundary between, and it's all around us. It's what you are seeing in the DMT laser experiment, but that boundary is what keeps us from those beings, from being just open and everywhere all around us. It is that veil, the physical veil. And so we've now understanding that math, working on an experiment right now. We have it with mathematic certainty that this will work. We're just in the preliminary process of it.
Could it be protecting us though?
Could
we do something here to open it up and it actually be a bad thing and we are exposed to something we shouldn't have been, and that was the purpose of this simulation?
The goal is not necessarily to open it or create some opening where things can come through. They're all around us all the time. It is more so the way this experience works, this is a simulation, if you will. It acts that way, but it's created by God. Your soul is eternal. Your soul existed before Matt was ever born. And that soul has been through many lifetimes. And so Dr. Michael Newton was a hypnotherapist, and he had interviewed over 7,000 people and done these sessions with them. But he had figured out there was a way that you could ask certain questions, and they were getting information from previous lifetimes and also information of what happens in between lives. And there was with so much consistency that there was really something to it. Dolores Cannon is another one who's very similar, but now that those are going to be very, very real. And so the moment that you die, that soul, your higher self, it's not the mind that you and I are speaking to each other on. There's one level above that, and that's your higher self, or you at your soul level. It's it feels like a video game. Your soul chooses the path because it needs to learn something in this existence so that it can become closer and advance to become closer to God on that divine realm. And so it chooses these different experiences based on what it needs to learn. And so once you pass on, it's very similar to what the Christians say, that you go through a life review. There are other souls that are there. When you go through your life review, you go through every moment of this lifetime in front of a council of advanced souls or other beings. Did you learn what you needed to learn in that instance? And you feel every moment that you've experienced, but you also feel every or every other being that you've interacted with, you feel what they felt in that moment as well. And it's not for punishment. It is, did you advance? Did you learn what you needed to learn? And that is the key. And so it's been absolutely fascinating to understand, but as this has continued to evolve, we started to continue to figure out why some of these certain things have been put on our radar, kind of like the Emerald Tablets we're talking about earlier. The Voynich manuscript they're getting to the point where they're starting to decode it. But when you start bringing in the Carrot document and the Bugosphere, there's some very similar symbols on those. There's a lot of correlation there. But one of the experts in decoding the Voynich manuscript realized on the Bugosphere that those symbols are not individual symbols. Each symbol is a combination of ancient languages. And when you start going to the etymology of each of those symbols and breaking that out, it starts to read out like a command. And so I thought it was fascinating. It kind of made sense. Okay, maybe that's why the Voynich is on our radar. We started applying that to the carrot document, and it completely worked. So that carrot document we were just showing, it, when you start breaking down what all of this means, it actually is gearbox timing, and which is fascinating. And so the gearbox timing that is there, though, completely ignores the a portion of our modern physics and 1,000% aligns with our understanding of how physics actually works in its existence, and it completely aligns with our math. And then we've just this last week have realized that we can also do the same thing with Betty Hill's symbols and also with Danny Sheehan's. So we this is fascinating stuff. But right now we've got people working on our equations, PhDs with electrical engineering that have done work with NASA's working on it right now, working on a lab setup so that we will be able to tune our environment instead of ourselves, and we will be able to get this symbolic layer that exists, this veil, to be able to show up without DMT.
I have a question. So what is your strongest, would you say, piece of evidence for the reasoning that convinces you of the simulation and stuff like that?
Everything
Can
in
I just add something onto that? Also, how would you distinguish real code from sort of visionary artifacts from people that are having these experiences?
are you saying just whether it's in their mind or not?
Yeah, yeah, pretty much.
So that's something we had trouble with because it's so small. And so, but what's interesting is you can magnify it. And so that you can even magnify it shows that it's outside of your mind. And so, but also there's been over 1,000 people that have seen the exact same thing in the code. But it had been a struggle to be able to get enough people to be able to draw what they see. They are very, very small. Um, and so it's validated itself actually once we started understanding the Bugosphere and how the math correlates with the carrot document and the understanding that this way they talk about, the linguist explains how the symbols work, it all aligns. And then now that we know that that completely aligns with our math, it lets us know that we are completely on the right track. And then when you start, if you were to list out what the Bugosphere says and what the Voynich says, and then Betty and Danny's glyphs say, it all completely aligns with what we're talking about. And the languages that we're talking about are ancient. They're Sumerian, there's cuneiform, they're Egyptian, Hebrew, Phoenician, Aramaic. But when you combine them, each type of language is a different type of a command in the structure of these. So some of them will start and stop. Some of them are transitions. Some of them, each has a different type of function. But that there are ancient languages in this and that they're combined in this shows it's language is not by happenstance. It is not naturally evolving. It is a part of the way that the existence works. And when you get into the understanding of how rituals and the esoteric and hermetic rituals work, the Rosicrucians have an app just for specific vowel sounds. Because how you say things in this existence is how you are able to manipulate whatever's going on for whatever ritual you were doing. And they're ancient languages that have it's not some just natural, somebody came up with a writing style. Everything is orchestrated. Every moment in this existence is information that you're to learn from. And as we've learned about the sides of this that are not the mathematical parts, the information they've given us of how to navigate this and how your soul is supposed to learn, going through challenges and hard things in life. We're not meant to just survive them. We're meant to learn things from them. And so it's when you start looking at the big picture of all of it together, it is obvious.
It's fascinating.
Has
You're
anybody
an
ever?
absolute mind fuck. I'll give you that. Um,
Dude, I live in a sci-fi film, buddy. Like every day, I've got beings around us. And so the deeper you get into this, and especially with my colleague who's got the NDEs. Now he can see everyone's spirit guides everywhere he goes. Like we'll go to lunch and the entire restaurant's full of people and beings are everywhere. And they're just all hanging out, sitting around. And then there's correlation. Some of the information that we're getting from one person to the other directly correlates with others. And so one of my best friends, since I was 15, I taught him how to do this. And so I was explaining to him the story of Jesus and the story of Mary Magdalene and what I was learning. And one of the beings that he deals with shows him a book. It's got green filigree on it and it's got gold hands on the front of it. It just tells me about it. I let my other friend know, hey, this is what he was saying came up. And so I get a call the next day and he said, okay, I took that to my guys. They say you're looking for this specific book. And so when we start looking at, it's called Liber M. It's you can find it listed in three archives, historic archives. Nobody knows where this book is. But when you start looking at it, it says it's written in this mythical magic language that explains how to communicate in between our dimension and the divine. And it exactly correlates with everything that we're learning.
So when people say about the alien technology and how did they get this in the past, I'm like, maybe they didn't have to come from anywhere. Maybe it was just like a flick of the switch going into another dimension, and then we're getting all that information given to them. And I've seen something that was on Jesse Michaels where these people were potentially sitting in dark rooms, and you can have the same experience in a dark room as you would if you was on DMT. Maybe these people, our ancestors, discovered something that when you sat in these dark rooms, after a few days you started to have these DMT trips, and you would get this sort of knowledge, and you could pass it on to the people that are around you.
So the strength of the signals that come through directly correlates with the alignment that you have in your personal life. There's so much noise and bullshit out there that it clouds your signal, but the moment you start getting rid of that, it completely allows that signal to be able to heard more. Integrating meditation and all of these things, it's all stuff I did not believe in. I thought it was just something that hippies do,
Exactly the
all of
same,
that.
Brad. Exactly the same.
Yeah.
I've completely changed as well, mate. I've gone down a very spiritual path, and this is what I mean. When you came up on Matt's live the other day and said it's all very heavily linked, and what you were talking about, it
Mm.
just blew my mind because it's exactly what I've been looking into. And one of the things that I wanted to ask as well, in regards to symbols, obviously, you put a picture of some of the symbols, but has anybody ever sort of come to you and after having DMT experiences, have they ever said that they've seen sort of ancient geometric symbols?
Oh,
Like,
yeah, actually. And so like for people that have no understanding of it at all, sacred geometry really matters, really matters. Like I got a call from one of my guys yesterday. He called me last week, said that he saw this geometry, didn't even know what it was. And then he starts researching it and he's like, I see Metatron's cube everywhere. And it keeps coming up. He had no understanding of it all. And so part of the information that I received is that I needed to start meditating with sacred geometry. And so Dr. Robert Gilbert, who is an expert and also a Rosicrucian, has these videos where he explains how to do this. And as I started doing that, there's one that's the Vesica Pisces. You're just imagining yourself inside this giant circle that's the Vesica Pisces, and you're in that middle piece. When I do that, my chakras start generating so much energy. I don't yet know what to do with it, but there is something very significant with it. And then there's people in our group that are able to, there's a concept called a Merkaba, which is it's sacred geometry that you're able to put yourself in and travel in.
it's a
Uh,
cube. It's a cube, and
yeah.
each side is a gateway.
Then there's some people that are really exceptionally gifted with it, and they can literally travel anywhere they want to. They can go to other planets, they can go to the moon, they can do all of these wild things with it. And it's all stuff that you would just completely think was batshit crazy until you start getting to know these people and understanding all of this, and there's validity to it for sure. The remote viewing part I find fascinating. There's
Just
people that can
um,
just
I I'm having visions myself, Brad, this is why I asked the question, and I have
Mm.
literally drawn a Merkaba and a gate key on a piece
Yeah,
of paper, and literally,
yeah,
and I've labeled it underneath and everything. That's why.
yeah.
That's why when you
He,
said
he
about
sent them to
motivation,
he sent them to me in a WhatsApp. He's like, Matt, have you seen these? And I'm like, well, what the fuck's that? I don't know what that is. I don't know. What are you all right? You need help? Do you know? I don't know.
yeah,
But you know, maybe people like you can help. I don't know. I'm not a geometry expert or anything like that. I don't claim to be. This is why I'm speaking to you, Brad, to get some information to enlighten me and the followers on this.
Yeah,
Do you
we
think
have
it's like a
experts that can
developer
develop.
mode? Do you think you know what you're a gamer? You said before you have the PlayStation.
Mm.
When you take this DMT, is it like a developer mode? Are you like a mod? Are you like, wow, I can see how to mod this if I wanted to now and stuff like that?
Some people can mod that. I can't. I have no control over it. For most people's interactions, it's more receiving information and the experience. Um, and so there's even things. So there is when you're on DMT, you see the most incredible things you will ever see,
I
ever.
really do want to try it, but
Yeah, and like,
I would need someone to hold my hand because I was
yeah,
scared of doing the gateway tape and my vibrating body. That's what stopped me from going out. So, and that
yeah,
that apparently is how it starts. And I could have had that
yeah.
experience, and I was too shit
S-
scared.
Those vibrations, you're raising your frequency to meet a threshold for something bigger, is what's happening. And so a
Mm.
lot of people that take DMT will hear this buzzing sound. That's their frequency raising to that alignment. And so there's many different things you can do with it. But the key to it, like it's literally the most beautiful stuff. Like the human language does there the words do not exist to be able to even explain what you see in a lot of this. And but there's what'll happen is it'll start putting things on your mind that just feel like distractions. You'll start thinking about somebody in your family or something that you need to do, and you kind of want to brush it off and focus on what the cool stuff that's in front of you. But the key to it is actually that those thoughts that are being put on your mind, they're being put there for a reason. They are trails of thought that are meant to help you develop as a person and grow with it. Like it's if they'll put something on your mind, for example, I'll put my son on my mind, and I'll just get this overwhelming amount of love in these experiences, or like, hey, you really need to do this, or else you're going to have a major problem in your life if you do not address this right now. Um, those little thoughts are actually the key to being able to use DMT as a tool for better development of yourself. And the incredible things outside of the being interactions that you see are a lot of that's more of the actual distraction. And the way I kind of explain it is imagine walking through St. Peter's Basilica and all this incredible stuff is everywhere, but the key to salvation is actually through a door in the janitor's closet. The more you start focusing on the things that it puts on your mind, the faster you advance through these. There are tests and all sorts of stuff that they give you that if you pass them, you continue to advance in your understanding and integration of DMT in your life.
Is is there is
when
there?
you
Oh,
you
sorry.
put. Sorry, Matt.
I was just going to say, is there any way we can spot any glitches in this simulation? You see these stupid
Oh,
videos of planes that aren't flying. When they are flying, it's just the way that it's been recorded or it's been edited and stuff like that. But is there actually a way that we could maybe spot maybe a glitch in this matrix that we live in?
oh. Well, I mean, think about the Mandela effects. Those are glitches. Those are timeline jumps. Those, which is as crazy of as a concept as that is, there are things that shift in this reality. Then, and when you start trying to figure out what happened, we're still trying to understand it completely. But I feel like that's probably the best example of a glitch in this for sure.
Um,
Absolutely.
would you say when you're sort of going into a DMT experience, and you've got questions about certain things,
Mhm.
would you consider that for instance, your first experiences, most of these questions do actually get answered with the experiences that you perceive while on having a DMT experience?
That depends from person to person. There are some people that completely can control where they go, or they can completely get answers of information that they're asking. I personally don't. My information is only receiving. But
But
my
so, for
situation is
instance,
very unique.
sorry, for instance, an example is the Grays, for instance.
Mhm.
Okay, I'll be very honest. I've experienced DMT. This is why I'm asking quite a few questions and things because I've got my own answers that I need from my experiences, if that makes
Mhm.
sense. And one of the things I've always, there was always like the greys, for instance, and there was always talk about good and bad, and I always thought it was just no, the greys are bad. Okay, but then on this certain experience, I had the only way I can explain it is there was like this black cloud, and then there was this white cloud, and then all of a sudden a face popped up of a grey alien. And
Mhm.
then all I will say is that was telling me that there are good and bad. And that's what I got from that
Yeah,
perception.
there is good and bad. Yeah, it's so. Well, let me answer the question right before this a little bit better. The interactions that I have are very unique, but a lot of the people that I've taught how to do this have the ability to communicate with their spirit guides and these beings that are with them all the time, as if it's conversational, and you be able to see them as if they're sitting across the couch from you, and you can touch them and they can touch you externally. You can feel them. The being that I deal with on a daily basis, Ultura, she like she was trying to show me how she phases in and out of our reality and how she can do it. And as I'm doing that, she is moving my left eyeball just slightly out of askew. And then there's times where I've felt her, like I felt this pressure on my eyelids and for me to close them. And then when I close them, she's showing me stuff in my mind's eye that she's trying to communicate to me. But that's mine's a little bit unique. Most of the people can have these like legitimate conversation, ask all the questions you want, get all the responses that you get. But when we get into talking about grays and that kind of stuff, over the last year, I've had over 20 UFO encounters. We've like my son is very gifted. He's 14, very gifted with this. We had a gray in our backyard 2 weeks ago. Like we have beings that show up regularly. We had one which was fascinating. Buddy calls, said, "Hey, I just had this interaction. This giant craft shows up. It's bigger than a car, smaller than a bus, and there's a being inside of it. And it says that he has information to give us." And so, like, it followed him around for 4 days, and the communication was, I'm here to, I'm supposed to show you this structure of this piece of technology. I need to show you this so that I can, as soon as I'm done with this, I can leave. And so that's like no joke. I won't explain what the technology is because some of it's very sensitive, but it is like just this incredible interactions. But with what
Can
my
you give us a
understanding with the
clue?
Grays,
Can you give us a little clue of the technology, maybe, just a little bit of a carrot?
it's a device that will allow for interdimensional communication.
Okay.
And so it's when you get this information and we start writing it down, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense until
See
you
that
start.
that kind of technology, if it is there, dangerous, very dangerous, right?
Yes, you're right. And so
Um,
that's why we're being, yeah, and we have stuff that's way more dangerous in the wrong hands. And so we're in the process, we're protecting all of it. We have multiple dead man switches in place already.
Technically,
I
though, don't we not, are we not already interdimensionally communicating? Because that's what they're saying that the quantum computer chip's doing. It's communicating with other quantum computers in other dimensions.
could be, yeah, and that could be the case. But this is going to be a little bit more significant. Um, yeah, so those, yeah, it gets really complicated when you get into the quantum stuff. It is a fascinating field of study, but what we're being shown, once you combine it with the rest of the information that we've been given, it's like these little pieces continue to make what we've been given grow, and it's like it's watching something unfold. And once you start, the other people that are able to do this, they're getting completely separate information, but once you combine them, they just completely synchronize, and we're getting more pieces of the puzzle.
do you think this is a literal simulation or like a metaphysical one?
Well, no, I think it's a literal simulation.
So you think it's like
It's
a
not,
computer? It's a computer simulation then?
it operates like that, but it's not. It's way more complicated than that. But when you talk about the doubles, it's this all of this really starts to explain the double split experiment and how all of that functions and why that functions that way. Um, this is literally just an experience. None of this technically is real. Like, and even when you get to the down to the particle level, like if I was to, touch this desk, I never physically actually touch it. Like it's
Yeah,
just
it's
a
true. Yeah,
repelling.
like
And
this
so,
isn't us. None of this matters. Yeah, none of this is even here.
right.
It's
Yeah, and
insane.
if you think about it, you've lived many lifetimes. You're here for a learning experience, and at the soul level, this is just a small experience on a much larger scale. And so it's just an interesting experience to your soul. All of the hard parts and all of the trauma and all of that stuff that you deal with is really just information for it, even though some of it's really hard. None of that carries on with us.
You got a question, Dan?
He's muted.
Dan, you muted.
No, carry on for a bit, Matt. I've not got one at the moment.
Yeah, I'm just going through some of the questions because obviously the question is there anything you want to show us, by the way? Because you did have your screen sharing before. Is there anything you want to show before? Because I do
Well,
think that there's potentially a part two to this conversation that we need to do as well.
yeah, I
Yeah,
think the
I think
part
there's
two
a
got,
lot
makes a lot of
more. I
sense.
think we'll cover a lot more. Can't cover everything today that you probably want to do, but we can definitely come back in a week or two and you can go through more stuff.
I've got questions
Yeah,
that we've not even covered yet. Do you know what I mean? So that's
yeah.
something that's.
But we can
Well, and
cover
this
it now if you
this
want. If you got a question, we'll cover it now. I'm good for time, but I'm just thinking maybe keep it not too long for people, and then we'll do a part two or something like that.
this is a lot to digest, and
Yeah.
so it is massive information. And so what typically we'll explain all of this stuff, and then as you start to integrate and understand and digest all of this stuff over the next few days, it'll start to unlock more and more information with you and questions. If we or wait a few more weeks, we should be able to have the DMT laser experiment without the DMT, those results back. We're continuing to analyze all of the stuff with Danny Sheehan's symbols and all of that stuff and understanding those more. And Betty Hills, which this was just last week that we started to decode what those symbols were saying for her, and really starting to understand now how important it's the information that Danny and Betty got are going to be directly related to what we're talking about now, as if those have been just clues waiting for this time. And so, yeah.
I was going to say you did mention something about the Boogosphere before. Do you want to? Should we end on that? Do you know something about the Boogosphere?
Yeah, I can tell you what it says. Let me pull that up. So each, like we talked about, each individual symbol is a combination of ancient languages. So like the
You can
first
share the
one,
screen if you want.
which,
Share the screen if you want.
well, I've got to be able to read this at the
All
same
right.
time,
Okay.
but
All right. Yeah. Got it.
I'll explain it some more. So like the first symbol is a combination of Sumerian, Egyptian, and Hebrew and Phoenician. But like when you start laying it out, that the etymology of those, it says seed of life force crossing dimensional thresholds. And then the next one says energy oscillation with dual polarities equals life movement. And then the next one would be focus force within a trinity or field. And then the next one is going to be synchronization of energy across quadrants or layers. And so when you start putting it together in more of like a narrative form, let me go to that. It says, um, where were they? A collapsed harmonic containment field that preserves prime-coded symbolic intelligence across dimensions. That's exactly what we've been talking about. There's that layer, that veil is there's symbols that run through it, and they have form and function, and it's how quantum entanglement happens. It's that layer is going to be what causes this existence to change and shift and function. It's that is the mechanism that is allowing all of that to happen. And when you start understanding what these things are saying, it's almost like they're dropping little nuggets that are the complete alignment with what is happening to us.
Wow. You might be interested in my next guest that I've got on actually in 11 days from now, Patrick Jackson. Do you know who he is?
I'm not familiar now.
He's from the UK and he's the one that speaks about the Sphere Network.
Oh
And
yeah,
he talks about what's going on around the planet and there's like these observational things and there's three different types of these and he seems to be getting backed up with science at the minute with Beatrice Villaroel finding these things, these transients
yeah.
from the 50s. So I've got him in 11 days and I'm really excited to be speaking to him. So I think this will all connect together. Get him
I'll
on
be
here, let
curious.
him do what you've just done and just tell people what he thinks is going on here. I want people
Yeah,
to come on like yourself and have a platform to speak on. And you've got your own platform that you can speak on, but it's good to get on other people's platforms and and share your
Oh,
knowledge, because you're a lot more
absolutely.
knowledgeable on this than me, especially this area of it. I ain't got a clue.
Well, one of the things I found interesting as you're evaluating the Bugosphere specifically is like when you look at the carrot document and the photo in the research report that was leaked, there you see some of the symbols on the parts that are very clean. When you look at the Bugosphere, it looks being in the military, you have one of those etching tools that would allow you to etch things into metal, marking your name on a tool or something like that. It's very crude. And I would think that if it was coming from an advanced intelligence, that it would have really clean lines and be very symmetrical. For some reason, this looks like some guy named Joe just had an etching gun and put those glyphs on there. It feels really man-made.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I'm not a massive fan of the Boogosphere. That's why I've not really covered it much. But I wanted your opinion on it because you said you had some information on it. So it's interesting that you said that you think it's man-made as well. So it's like
Yeah.
you're on.
Well,
It seems to be on the same wavelength as me that I don't buy into this. But it doesn't mean that the whole thing is
well,
fake and that there isn't spheres and stuff like that. Obviously there
oh,
is, but
no, I think what it does is it validates because that reverse engineering program was from the 80s. So the amount of time that they've been able to figure out how these symbols work, they said that they were able to put them, if you put the right symbols in the right order in the right condition on a table, you could make a table dance. If you put the right symbols on an aluminum sphere, you can probably make it fly without propulsion.
explain that to me. What you said that before, and I was like, what does he mean by
It's
that?
yeah. So these symbols, we're in call it a simulation, and so they're like these there's codes, if you will, and it's encoded, and you see this stuff in the DMT laser experiment. It's this code that runs through everything, and if you understand how it works, you can apply it to whatever you need it to do and cause it to actually do things that are outside of our normal physics.
Uh,
I'm going to say again, in regards to the Boogosphere, do you think it's sort of connected with the Giza pyramid? I mean, even if it's man-made or not, because that symbol on the top of it, I'll say again, looks like a heat signature of a pyramid and
Mm.
its walls.
That
So
one,
maybe,
that part of it, I don't quite grasp yet. And it looks like there's little contacts on there, and when it comes out to the end of those, it looks like a different type of material. I'm think it's gonna be really interesting to see how that works. But if it was a man-made technology, maybe that's how it may be sitting on a cradle that connects to it, and I don't know, maybe charges it or whatever. But what's also fascinating, I just saw this the other day, is they're doing experiments with that Bugosphere. They were starting to do ancient mantras and singing those around it, and it caused a response within the Bugosphere itself. And then that sphere also, the density and weight of it changes, and it manipulates, and so it looks like it's probably has some magnetism function in it. And if you look at it, the X-ray of it, it kind of looks like the Wardenclyffe Tower from Tesla on its side. It would not surprise me if they're manipulating the electromagnetism as some anti-gravitic. Somebody's got to figure it out. I'm pretty sure that one's man-made.
you muted, Matt.
Matt, we can't hear you, bud.
Matt, we can't hear
can you hear me now?
you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
I'm going to say, I think we should leave it there for today.
yeah.
Like I said, I spent most of the chat just staring at you, like fascinated with what you're saying. Because, like I said, 27 years researching, and I started off, are we just alone in the universe? What are UFOs? Now we're on about simulation, we're on about other dimensions, and it's just like, wow, it's like
Yeah. I
maybe
was at the
it does
same
need to be
spot a
kept a
year ago.
secret. Maybe there is something that the population should not know about. It
It
is a bit
it needs
far
to
out
be
there.
it needs to be protected.
Yeah.
And so
You
don't put it
sound
all out there.
your sound went there, Brad. Maybe that's them messing
Fair
about with
enough.
you.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I'm all right now. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe I won't say that then.
Oh, yeah, okay,
That's
well,
it. That's typically we'll save that for another time when maybe they'll allow it.
yeah,
That's legitimately how this works.
I'd like to speak to you in a couple of weeks, maybe after the Patrick Jackson one. Maybe watch that one and give your opinion on
Yeah.
what Patrick says. I think that'd be good. And maybe there's more things to come out about Beatrice and these peer review papers, and we can go further into it. And
There's a reason all this is happening now. It's
yeah,
all coming out for a reason.
yeah, I
I've got a
agree.
lot. I've got a lot of questions as well of how this links to, because obviously when you were on Matt's live the other week, you said it's all very spiritual. So there's a lot of people that have sent me questions about the spiritual side and how it all links up and stuff. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? There's a lot
Oh
of people
yeah.
interested in what you've got to say, Brad. So
Yeah.
really
I'm an
really
open book.
interesting, mate. Really
I
interesting.
am my TikTok is Brad of Arc. Right now lately I'm wrapping up a series where of the universal laws of how to navigate this existence, explaining each one and how they function. And I'm telling you, like once you start understanding how that part of this works and how you're supposed to learn and navigate this entire existence, it completely changes the power dynamic of how you interact with it. All of the hard shit that you go through, you don't take it as you're trying to survive it. You start understanding why it's happening and how to navigate it properly, and you start navigating everything with peace and clarity. And takes the emotion and the pain out of a lot of it. And once you start doing that, you start navigating this like a master, and it's watching a movie unfold after that. It's the most incredible experience ever.
Where's the best place for people to reach out to you? Other people might want to speak to you, want to see this and stuff like that. Where can they get?
Yeah.
Where can they get in touch with you, basically?
I've just started to upload some of my stuff on YouTube. That's taking a little bit of time. But Brad of Arc on TikTok is the best place to reach me. We have a Discord link is there as well, where we've got over 1,000 people in that community with some unbelievable gifts that teaching people how to remote view, how to do the gateway tapes and lucid dream and do all of this out of body stuff. It's all very, very, very real. So
I will link it all in the description, all your profiles and everything like that. And anything else you want me to add, just send me a DM. I'll try and get it
sounds
up
great.
tonight. I'll try and get it up tonight. If not, it'll be tomorrow night. I'll just see what
Yeah.
time I've got to do it and stuff like that. But thank you so much for coming on, Brad. Thank you for joining us,
Yeah.
Dan. And
No,
we'll
appreciate
we'll
you,
have a
Matt. Thank
part
you.
2 very soon, I'm pretty sure, because I'm
Yeah.
fascinated with this.
Yeah.
So thank you, lads, and have a good evening.
Yeah, and
You
pal.
too.
Take
Cheers,
care.
Brad. Thank
Take
you.
care. Cheers. See ya.